The shadow in Pine Hollow. We thought Pine Hollow would be perfect for a weekend escape. Just a few friends, the forest, and no Wi-Fi. The drive there was long and winding, with trees forming a tunnel over the road, their branches scratching against the windows like skeletal fingers. By the time we arrived, the sun was already dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple dot. The campsite was small but picturesque. A clearing surrounded by thick pines with a narrow stream trickling. Nearby, my friends Mark, Jesse, and Elena laughed as they set up tents, their voices bouncing off the trees. I unpacked the firewood, trying to ignore a strange tightening in my chest. Everything felt normal, safe, but the forest has a way of hiding its secrets. Night fell faster than expected. Around the campfire, the warmth and light created a small sanctuary, but as the flames flickered, the shadows between the trees seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. We told jokes to keep our spirits high, but every laugh sounded hollow. Forced. It started with a sound subtle at first, almost imperceptible. A slow dragging, like something heavy being pulled over dead leaves. My stomach knotted. I tried to dismiss it as a branch or a small animal, probably just a deer, Mark said, though his voice lacked conviction. But it didn't sound like a deer, not at all. It was deliberate, methodical, and it was getting closer. I squinted into the darkness, scanning the tree line. That's when I saw it. A figure stood motionless between two massive pine trunks. Tall, twisted, human, yet wrong in every possible way. Its limbs moved at unnatural angles. Its head tilted too far back, almost as if it were studying us. I couldn't see eyes, only darkness where a face should have been. We froze. Every instinct screamed to run, but we couldn't. The dragging continued, creeping closer. Our laughter had died entirely, leaving only the crackle of the fire and the heavy pounding of our hearts. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt meaningless as the figure lingered at the edge of the light. We whispered, but no sound carried beyond our huddled circle. I think it knows we're awake, Jessie muttered, her voice barely audible. I wanted to comfort her, to convince myself it was harmless. But the forest around us was silent in an unnatural way. Even the stream sounded muted, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. Suddenly, the shadow shifted. Faster this time. It moved with impossible speed, stopping just beyond the firelight. My throat went dry. I wanted to scream, but no sound emerged. Mark grabbed a flashlight and shone it toward the figure. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing. There was only the space where it had stood, and then the dragging resumed, now circling the campfire, keeping its distance. Watching sleep was impossible. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my chest tighten. The others whispered theories, maybe a lost hiker, maybe a bear, but we all knew it was neither. The forest was alive, watching us, calculating. I sat awake, clutching a flashlight, trying to hold on to some sense of reality. I could feel eyes on me. Not human eyes, but something that could pierce the darkness, see every thought, every fear. And then it growled. A low, guttural sound, far too deep for a human. It echoed between the trees and rolled across the clearing like a wave. I felt my knees weaken. My friends pressed closer together, huddling as if physical proximity could keep it at bay. We stayed awake for hours. The shadow never approached the fire, but it didn't leave. Every time the light flickered, I could swear it inched closer, its twisted limbs scraping over the leaves with that same dragging noise. Dawn came gray and cold. We dared to leave the tents and found the ground around the campsite littered with shallow clawed footprints. Too large, too wide, bipedal, but horribly wrong. And near the fire, scratched into the dirt, were letters. Perfectly formed, yet terrifying in their simplicity. Stay. No one spoke. We packed in silence, avoiding the forested edges as we left. The drive back to civilization was quiet, filled with the unspoken fear that we had been marked, observed, hunted. Weeks passed, but the forest followed me in memory. Every time I closed my eyes at night, I could feel it. The dragging steps returned, faint, just at the edge of hearing. My friends reported nightmares, sleepless nights, shadows in their peripheral vision. None of us went back to Pine Hollow. None of us wanted to, but something in me knows it's still there, waiting, watching. One night, I was lying in bed, trying to convince myself it was over. And then I heard it soft, deliberate. Not in the forest this time, but in the room itself, dragging across the floorboards. Slow, methodical. I didn't move. I couldn't. I could only stare at the darkness and realize the truth. Pine Hollow wasn't just a campsite. It was alive. It was hunting. And it had followed us home. The next morning, I found a message scratched into the wall beside my bed. 3 simple letters. Stay. I don't know how it got there or what it wants. But every night I hear it closer. Circling the apartment, waiting for the firelight that isn't there anymore. And now, I'm not sure it's waiting for me to leave. Whispers at Raven Creek. We had been planning this trip for months. A weekend getaway to escape city life, to feel the peace of untouched nature. Raven Creek had come highly recommended in an old camping forum, though a few posts hinted at strange occurrences. I didn't pay them much attention. It was just a creek in the middle of nowhere, with dense woods and trails, perfect for hiking and a bit of solitude. My friends Mark, Jenna, and Lucas were equally excited. We packed our gear, loaded the car, and drove through winding roads lined with towering pines, their shadows stretching like dark fingers across the asphalt, arriving just before sunset. Raven Creek looked innocently beautiful. The water glittered as it meandered over smooth stones, birds darted between branches, and the breeze smelled of pine and earth. We pitched our tents on a flat patch of ground near the creek, laughter echoing in the open air. Even the faint rustling whispers of the trees seemed friendly at first, like the forest itself was welcoming us. By dusk, we gathered around the campfire. Flames danced, throwing flickering light over our faces. We roasted marshmallows, told stories, and tried to scare each other with exaggerated ghost tales, though none of us were brave enough to venture into the dark woods alone. That was when I first heard it, a soft, almost melodic murmur, carried on the wind. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" Mark replied, tossing another log onto the fire. It sounded like someone whispering my name. I forced a laugh, but it felt hollow even to me. "Sarah, you've been staring at the creek for too long," Jenna said, nudging me. "It's just the wind through the trees." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to convince myself that the soothing night sounds of nature were harmless. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. "Sarah." My stomach dropped. The whisper came from no single direction. It surrounded me, weaving through the darkness, brushing against my ears like icy fingers. I turned to look at the forest, heart pounding, but the trees were still. Only the shadows seemed to move unnaturally, stretching beyond the firelight. I think I need some air," I muttered, stepping away from the fire. Lucas chuckled nervously. "You're imagining things. Come back before you trip on a root." I ignored him, moving closer to the creek. The whispers grew louder, circling, pressing closer. My flashlight flickered, as if struggling against the darkness. I swung it over the ground and froze. Small, tiny handprints were pressed into the dirt around the creek, so old they looked weathered, but disturbingly fresh at the same time. They were children's hands, I realized with a jolt. Impossibly small, and eerily detailed dot, and near the water's edge, etched into the mud, were words. "You're next." I stumbled back to the campfire, heart hammering. My friends were asleep or pretending to be. I shook Mark. "Wake up, look." He opened his eyes slowly, then yawned. Look at what? The handprints, the message by the creek. Something's here. My voice trembled. Mark's eyes darted to the trees and then back to me. Sarah, calm down. You're freaking everyone out. But I knew it wasn't my imagination. The whispers intensified, now a cacophony of voices overlapping. Urgent. They spoke in my voice, in my mother's voice, calling me, taunting me, echoing every fear I'd ever had. I turned in every direction, trying to locate the source, but the forest seemed to stretch endlessly. Every tree, every shadow, every ripple in the creek felt alive. Jenna stirred. Sarah, are you okay? I can't stay here. I whispered. We need to leave. We grabbed our packs and ran, but the path back to the car was no longer where we left it. Every time I thought I recognized the trail, the forest shifted. Trees seemed to rearrange, shadows stretched, twisting toward us like hands. The whispers now guided me or misled me, calling my name, chanting, giggling. Lucas clutched my arm. I can't see anything. Where are we? I tried to shout, but my voice was swallowed by the murmurs. Panic clawed at my chest. The tiny handprints reappeared along the path, etched into dirt, mud, even tree bark. Their small fingers pointed accusingly, leading us deeper into the woods. Instead of out, then I saw them shapes in the darkness. Children, pale, hollow-eyed, their clothes tattered as if from decades ago. They didn't speak, only stared, their whispers now synchronized, echoing directly in my head. You're next. You belong here. You can't leave. We ran blindly, the shadows pursuing, pressing, closing in. My flashlight fell and shattered. On the rocks. I fell to my knees, hearing the whispers converge into a single voice. Stay with us. Somehow we stumbled into a clearing. Dawn had begun to break, scattering weak light across the forest floor. The children were gone. The handprints vanished. Even the whispers dimmed, as though they were tied to the darkness. We ran until the forest thinned and the creek was behind us, its waters sparkling innocently once more. Back in the car, none of us spoke. We drove in silence, hearts racing. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting the forest to swallow the road behind us out. Weeks later, I would realize the horror wasn't over. Alone at home, late at night, I'd hear faint murmurs in empty rooms, soft echoes of my name carried on a non-existent breeze. Shadows moved where none should exist. Tiny handprints appeared on windowsills and mirrors, vanishing when I blinked. Raven Creek had not released me. And I knew, with chilling certainty, it never would. Even now sometimes. I hear it. Sarah, you're next. The Vanishing Trail. We had been hiking in the northern forest for years, yet nothing in our experience could have prepared us for what lay ahead that afternoon. The sun had been high when we stumbled across the unmarked trail. Mark, always eager for shortcuts, claimed it would lead us directly to Raven Falls, a secluded waterfall deep in the woods. None of us had heard of this path before, and the map didn't mark it, but curiosity, or perhaps some foolish adventurous instinct, pushed us forward. At first, the trail seemed innocuous. The undergrowth was thick but navigable, and the forest around us hummed with birdsong. The smell of pine and damp earth filled the air, and I felt that familiar serenity that always came when I left the world of concrete behind. But as we ventured further, the trail changed subtly and then dramatically. The trees began to lean toward us, their trunks bent at unnatural angles, as if straining to watch our every move. Roots, thick and knotted, jutted out from the ground, resembling gnarled fingers reaching to trip us. The forest felt alive in a way that was both mesmerizing and unsettling. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes tracking our movements. Do you guys feel that? I whispered, glancing over my shoulder. Mark waved me off. Relax, it's just the forest. You're spooking yourself. Jenna didn't respond immediately. Her usual chatter had stopped, replaced by tense, whispered comments about shadows flitting between the trees. Lucas, ahead of us, seemed unnervingly quiet. Even the birds had fallen silent. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. I had lost track of time. The path twisted and turned in ways that didn't make sense. Landmarks we thought we remembered, like a cluster of moss-covered boulders or a particularly crooked pine, reappeared, but not in the same order. Each loop left us more disoriented, as though the forest itself were reshaping around us. "Something isn't right," Jenna muttered, her voice trembling. "I feel like we've been here before. Or we never left." Our phones were useless. Number signal, no GPS, nothing. We tried to mark our path with sticks, rocks, anything that could help us find our way back, but every mark disappeared almost as soon as we made it, leaving the forest pristine, untouched and hostile, then without warning, we stumbled upon a clearing. At first, it seemed like a relief, a break from the suffocating density of the forest, but relief quickly turned to unease. In the center of the clearing sat a campsite, small and abandoned. The tents were neatly pitched, their flaps tied open, and a campfire ring sat cold but intact, not a leaf out of place. The place was immaculate, as though someone had left only yesterday. I approached cautiously, my boots crunching over fallen pine needles. "Who would be here?" I asked, but my voice sounded hollow in the still air. Inside one of the tents lay a journal, its leather cover worn but clean. Something compelled me to pick it up. The pages were yellowed, but the ink remained sharp dark. I opened it, scanning the entries, each one chronicling a different hiker who had ventured deep into this forest and never returned. The final entry made my blood run cold. "The forest doesn't like strangers, it keeps them. Forever, you think. You can walk its paths safely, but every step brings you closer to it. It watches, it waits, and it remembers. Do not trust the trail. If you can read this, you are already too late." I dropped the journal, heart hammering. My friends were staring at me wide-eyed, voices shaky. We need to leave," I said. We scrambled back to the trail, but the clearing behind us had changed. The path we had followed was gone. Trees that had been scattered now formed a solid, impenetrable wall. Branches and roots twisted into patterns that weren't natural. Panic began to settle in as the realization hit. The trail we had come in on had vanished. "Which way?" Mark shouted, trying to keep his voice steady. "Which way is the way out?" I could see nothing familiar. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, a labyrinth of green and shadow. And then the sound came, a low, guttural growl, rising from the darkness beyond the tree line. It was deep, resonant, and alive, as though something massive stalked us, waiting for the right moment to strike. We ran, sprinting blindly through the twisted undergrowth. Every tree seemed alive, each shadow a potential threat. I felt claws of unseen branches snagging at my clothes, scraping my skin. The forest itself seemed determined to keep us inside, to bend and shift in ways impossible to comprehend. Then the whispers began. Soft at first, like wind through leaves, but slowly growing clearer. They were voices, many voices, all calling out in overlapping tones, echoing our names, mimicking each other, mocking us. Some were familiar. Others were grotesque, twisted versions of voices we had never heard before. "Stop, you can't leave," the whispers hissed. I stumbled over a root and fell into a shallow ditch. My flashlight, which had somehow survived. The run flickered and died, leaving me in near total darkness. Panic clawed at my mind as I tried to stand, and I felt something brush past my arm, a fleeting shadow. Faster than anything human, moving with impossible speed. "We have to stay together," I screamed, but the forest had other plans. Paths split endlessly. Every step we took led us deeper into the maze, past landmarks that reappeared in impossible arrangements, past silent, watching shadows that seemed to grow taller, darker, more aware of us with each passing moment. Hours or maybe minutes later, we stumbled upon another clearing. This one was different. The air was colder, heavy with a damp, metallic scent. In the center stood an ancient, rotting tree, its roots like writhing serpents curling into the earth. Around it were small piles of belongings, rusted cans, broken backpacks, journals with pages torn and water-stained. It was a graveyard of those who had ventured too far, a testament to the forest's cruelty. I picked up a journal, flipping through the pages. The entries were frantic, written by hikers who had vanished, their handwriting shaky, their words desperate. It waits at night, hiding behind the trees. Its eyes see everything. You can run, but it always finds you. Betrayal will take you. And when you think you are safe, it will take your friends one by one. If you find this, don't follow the path. A scream shattered the silence. Jenna had stopped frozen, staring at something in the darkness. I turned my flashlight toward her, and my stomach dropped. A figure crouched behind the tree human. In shape, but wrong. Its limbs were elongated, its head tilted at an impossible angle. Eyes like black pits stared into mine. It hissed, low and wet, and the shadows around it seemed to move with it, crawling along the forest floor. "Run!" I screamed. We bolted again, limbs burning, lungs screaming for air. The forest seemed endless, each turn leading us into deeper darkness. I could hear it behind us, the guttural growl, the rustling of leaves, whispers blending into one continuous, terrifying sound. Eventually, exhaustion overtook fear. We collapsed near a shallow stream, soaked and trembling. The sun had dipped low, and the forest seemed darker than night should allow. None of us spoke. The air was thick with anticipation, as though the forest itself were holding its breath, waiting. Then from the shadows the trail appeared like a ghost emerging from the mist. A narrow path, lined with familiar trees, leading back to the edge of the forest. Relief washed over us, but it was short-lived. Somewhere behind us, deeper in the trees, the growl rose again, this time closer, and laughter childlike, cruel echoed through the woods. We didn't stop. We ran until the forest ended, the sun rising weakly on the horizon. Behind us, the tree stood silent, patient, waiting for the next trespassers. Even now, weeks later, I can't shake the memory. Sometimes in dreams, I am back in that forest, hearing the whispers calling my name, feeling the presence of something inhuman stalking me. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to the bone, that the trail will never let me go, because the forest remembers. And it waits. Night of the Lantern. We thought it would be nothing more than an adventurous night hike, a harmless idea born out of boredom, laughter, and the reckless courage that only comes when you're far from civilization with a group of friends who believe nothing bad could ever really happen to them. But we were wrong. And that night has stayed with me like a scar I'll never shake off. There were 5 of us, me, Daniel, his girlfriend Lily, and our friends Matt and Jenna. We had been camping for 2 days already, set up near the woods that ran along the cliffs overlooking the valley, and on the 3rd night, Daniel suggested we hike to the cliffs under lantern light, claiming the moon would be bright enough and the view would be worth it. At first, it sounded exciting, and the group agreed instantly. So just past midnight, we lit our lanterns, actual glass lanterns, not flashlights, because Matt insisted it gave real camping vibes, and started along the narrow trail that wound deeper into the forest. For the first half hour, it was all jokes, teasing, and ghost stories. The light of our lanterns swayed and flickered, casting long, thin shadows on the ground and trees around us. Every now and then, someone would jump at a snapping twig or rustling leaves, and we'd all laugh, reassured by the warmth of each other's company. But the deeper we went, the quieter it got, as though the forest itself were trying to smother our laughter. By the time we reached the cliff's edge, our voices had lowered without us even realizing it. We stood there in awe for a moment, the valley stretching beneath us, silvered in moonlight, quiet and endless. Then we saw it. Far below, in the dense forest that spread at the bottom of the valley, a small flickering light appeared. At first we assumed it was just another hiker, maybe someone camping out like us. But the more we watched, the stranger it seemed. The light didn't behave like a lantern or flashlight. It hovered, floated a few feet above the ground, drifting slowly between the trees, as though it wasn't being carried but alive in its own way. "Maybe it's a firefly," Lily whispered, though even she didn't believe it. It was too bright, too steady, too deliberate. Curiosity overrode caution, and Daniel grinned like he always did when trouble called, saying, "Let's go check it out." I wanted to object, something in my gut twisting uneasily, but when everyone else agreed, I didn't want to be the one to ruin the mood. So we began descending the steep, uneven trail that led into the forest below. As we went deeper, the air grew colder, heavier, as if something unseen pressed down on us. The trees thickened around the trail, and soon the moonlight barely reached through the canopy. Our lanterns became our only guide, small bubbles of light in a suffocating sea of darkness. The strange light ahead moved deeper and deeper, pulling us like moths to a flame. It would drift, pause, flicker, then move again, always just far enough that we couldn't quite reach it, yet close enough to keep us chasing. After 20 minutes, the forest felt endless, and the light became less like a beacon and more like a lure. The silence was unbearable, broken only by our crunching footsteps and the soft, unsteady hiss of our lantern flames. Then it happened. We heard it. A sound that froze us in our tracks. It was faint at first, carried on the breeze, but unmistakable, sobbing. A low, soft crying, echoing between the trees, fragile and pitiful, like someone lost and broken. We exchanged nervous glances. "Do you hear that?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded, gripping his lantern tighter. "Maybe someone's hurt," he said. But I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe it either. The sobbing grew louder as we walked, seeming to circle us, rising and falling like it came from everywhere at once. My skin prickled, every instinct screaming at me to run. But still, we pressed on, drawn toward the floating light. My breath caught in my throat when I realized the sobbing didn't sound natural. It wasn't human. It was too rhythmic, too hollow, like an imitation of grief rather than real pain. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Our lanterns flickered violently, shadows leaping across the trees, like living things. Then the light, the one we had been chasing, vanished, gone in an instant. We stood there in the pitch black, staring at the empty air where it had been, hearts pounding. "Where the hell did it go?" Matt whispered. But before anyone could answer, Lily gasped, pointing into the darkness. "Look," she whispered. At first, I saw nothing, but then my eyes adjusted and I realized what she had seen. Dozens of shadows crouched in the underbrush, surrounding us. Human-shaped but twisted, hunched, their outlines faint but unmistakable in the thin moonlight. They didn't move. They just stared. Fear washed over me like ice water, paralyzing every nerve in my body. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. That's when the light reappeared, not in the distance this time, but directly above me. It hovered a foot over my head, bathing us in pale, sickly glow. And in that light, I saw them clearly. For the first time. Figures, dozens of them, pale as bone, their eyes hollow pits that seemed to drink in the light, their mouths stretched into wide, unnatural grins that revealed nothing but emptiness. They crouched in unnatural poses, some bent backwards, some twisted sideways, like their bones didn't fit their bodies. Their skin looked damp, almost translucent, as if they had been pulled from the bottom of a lake and left to rot. The moment my gaze locked with theirs, my chest tightened and I couldn't breathe. Then they moved. Not like people, but like insects. Jerky and fast, darting closer between the trees, their grins widening as they came. Lily screamed, and that snapped me back to life. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing her arm, and we bolted. The forest erupted around us, shadows darting, sobbing voices returning louder, closer, layered with whispers that hissed our names. Daniel, Sarah, Matt, Jenna. The lantern shook in our hands as we sprinted, the light trembling violently, barely holding back the suffocating darkness. I tripped on roots, branches clawing at my skin, but I didn't stop. None of us did. Behind us, I could hear them, those things crawling, dragging, their bodies moving in impossible ways, their hollow laughter echoing through the trees. We stumbled back onto the trail, though I couldn't recognize it anymore. It twisted and turned in ways it hadn't before, the forest rearranging itself around us as though it wanted to trap us forever. "This way," Daniel shouted, but even he sounded unsure. My chest burned, my lungs screaming for air, but the whispers wouldn't stop. They pressed in from all directions, overlapping, mocking, growing louder with every step. "Stay. Stay. With us, stay forever." The lantern flames sputtered, almost dying, and I thought we would be swallowed whole by the dark. But then somehow we broke through. The trees thinned, the trail widened, and suddenly we burst into the clearing. Where our camp sat waiting, we collapsed near the fire pit, gasping, trembling, staring wide-eyed at each other. For a long time, none of us spoke. Then Matt whispered, "They're gone." But even as he said it, I wasn't sure. The forest around us felt wrong, as though those hollow-eyed things still lingered, watching from the shadows just beyond the light. We didn't sleep that night. None of us dared to close our eyes. And when the first hint of dawn broke through the trees, we packed up in silence, our movements shaky, our faces pale. As we left, I glanced back one last time. The forest was still, the morning light softening the edges of the trees. But in the distance, at the edge of the clearing, I saw it. A faint, flickering lantern, hovering between the trunks, waiting. And though I told myself I'd never hear it again, that night, lying in my bed at home, I woke to the sound of soft sobbing outside my window, and the faint glow of a lantern shining through the glass.